Hi there, Kathrin.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good, good. How are you doing?
Excellent. I'm doing well, thank you. I apologize for the sound issues that I had originally. I switched over to my headset mic and then I sounded all muffled. I apologize.
Yeah, no worries. You
Rookie
sound great
mistake.
now.
Rookie mistake. So please, I'll let you introduce everyone on the panel. Welcome everyone, and I'll come in when there's a few minutes left, and hopefully we can take any Q&A, and I'll let you, of course, moderate the Q&A session at the end as well. All right.
Fantastic.
Good luck, everyone. Thank you.
We're still waiting for one more panelist, I think,
Oh,
but I think
are
she's
we?
almost here, so she's coming. But let me introduce
All right.
things here. Thanks so much for passing the baton, Brian. Yeah, I'm really excited to be hosting this panel today. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'm Kathrin Bussmann. I'm the president and chief strategist at Verbaccino. I'm also the host of the Worldly Marketer podcast. And I am currently also heading content localization at Bubble, which is a digital marketing agency. There you go. I need more caffeine. I may not look like my profile picture right now because it's been a year since I had a haircut, almost to the day, so you'll have to forgive me. But I'm very interested in this topic that we're going to cover today. As we mentioned, the title is Start Here, the Case for Strategic Content Localization. And I would love to introduce my fantastic panelists. We first have Yuka Nakasone, who is the Globalization and Localization Director at Intento. She is joining us from the Barcelona area. Next, we have Miguel Sepulveda, who is the Global Localization Manager at King, and he is also joining us from the Barcelona area. We have Patrick Nunes, the Director of Global Communications and Design at Rotary International. He's joining us from the Chicago area. And last but not least, I am hoping that we have Carmen Aviles, who is the Localization Manager at Agilent. She is joining from the Madrid area. So we have 3 people in Spain, 1 person, myself in Canada, and we have Patrick representing the US today. So welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Hello. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to see, oh, there she is. Hi, Carmen. Oh, good, you're here. Fantastic. All right, so let's dive into this. So the general theme here is, content prioritization. So let's start by talking about, before we can talk about what content to prioritize, we have to categorize our content. So I want to start with that as sort of the foundation for all of this. Based on your experience, I'd like each one of you to tell me a little bit about how you in your organization categorize content, how you think it should be categorized based on things like the customer journey or the stakeholder journey in the case of a nonprofit. And can you share some kind of examples of how you in your work categorize content in a way that's useful to you? And let's start with Miguel.
Okay, icebreaker. Customer journey, it's so important nowadays that I'm really happy we have today the opportunity to talk about this and also explore the connection between the customer journey and the content needed in each phase. Content drives the customer journey. And we as localization professional need to figure out how to reach potential clients with the right content, in the right place, at the right time, and it's all about timing. And let me illustrate my point here with one example. I want to talk about the customer journey of a game. That's what we do at King, great games. But actually the different stages and content categories I'm going to mention, I think they might work also for a mobile app or other digital services. So maybe this is something that the audience might find useful and perhaps adapted to the product. In a game, the customer journey has 3 main phases. Awareness is the first one. And awareness is the critical first step. And without awareness, there is no journey. Hence, the goal at this stage is to create content and spread widely across as many channels as possible. In this stage, we are concerned about SEO, paid advertisement, influencers campaign. Content categories in this phase are, for example, media coverage, advertisement in multiple channels, Instagram posts, tweets, social media in general, customer testimonials, microsite, to name a few. All this is content that we might have in that category of the engagement. And content at this stage should be high quality, so we make a positive first impression. Hopefully we convince them and download the game and they start playing. And that is the second phase in the content customer journey. Therefore, in this phase, the goal of the user journey and the content categories are different. And in this phase, we may have content categories such as in-game content, tutorial, live ops, product updates. So basically here we have all the content related to the game that we see while interacting with the product. And then finally, we have the third phase, which is building the habit of play the game and hopefully pay. And the content here is designed to engage users and increase monetization. And content type in this phase of the journey is around community forums, newsletters, scheduled blog posts, surveys, user-generated content, tweets, FAQs. So with this content type, it's all about providing enough value to our users to make them want to return. This means also making them feel like part of a community. And this community feeling through the content is crucial, because then we are closer to make them fans of our product, and they spread out the word about how great the product is. And this is, for example, the behaviors we see in many users from Tesla or Apple. They share in their circles how great the product is. And that's a great sign now that customer journey from a content perspective is going in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Yuka, you're more in the B2B space. How would you categorize content in a different way from what Miguel is just describing? Can you talk a bit about how you do it at Intento? Or how you've done it in other roles that you've led?
Yeah, in B2B space, I don't think there's lots of difference between B2B and B2C if we talk about digital channel, because some things said about B2B is a myth, like we can do more in English for B2B. Maybe it's not true. So localization is a key for B2B, B2C. But if I talk about not a big operations like startup, I do small companies, and in this space we don't have lots of budget, so we really have to look at what's effective and what needs to be done rather than doing everything. So categorizing through first, in this type of companies, I have to categorize through functions like marketing, legal, support, product. Maybe product comes first, for example. This type of categorization. And by talking that, for example, Intento helps global brands to effectively and efficiently translate their content into other languages by leveraging AI and machine translation, which means there's more to give for the same budget, and we are reaching to more functions. So categorization for me comes with functions, more or less. Does it
Carmen,
make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. It makes a lot of sense. Carmen, how do you categorize your content at Agilent in terms of the customer journey that you have to think about?
It's very interesting because I can relate to things that Miguel said and things that Yuka said. We are B2B, and we are part of a technology industry. We sell big instruments here, and for us, it's true that the assumption is like, okay, we deal with scientists. Scientists speak English. Well, not so true. They might speak English, but that doesn't mean that they want to consume content, information in English, right? Uh, that was the first breakthrough with my teams. We actually did a couple of customer surveys where they clearly said, yeah, we understand you, but in my free time I don't want to read you in not an, I mean, it's an extra effort we are not willing to do. um so as part of that exercise, we got a little bit more of push for localization, and we were built as part of the content journey, customer slash content journey mapping. And in that scenario, it was very interesting because as part of, we mapped the whole journey for different personas. We were matching where the content fits. And we were identifying different pain points for customers. So we were able to see how content fits to mitigate those pain points customer currently have. So categorization was more or less what Miguel was saying, right? It's the whole aware to decide journey, and then the onboarding and support until hopefully, I mean, they might leave, but it's these two buckets. It's product information and uh, support information for making decisions. And then you have all the aware. So for the aware, it was no, it's all the ads, email marketing, all the push that's in local language, because if not, you won't get attention from customers. And then you have all the product information separated in different buckets for us, right? That it's even consumed on the decide piece or in the support part, right? So it's quite interesting.
And Patrick, I mean, of course, you're in the nonprofit sector, and you don't have customers. You have, you know, members and stakeholders, and you know, you're at the global headquarters, but you have chapters, you know, Rotary chapters all over the world, and of course, also Rotary International has been around for over 100 years at this point, I think, right? So it's not so much about discovery at this point for you. It's so how do you categorize your content in useful ways for your purposes?
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. I think it's interesting because for us, we have, because of the size of the organization and because we're truly from the ground up, right? The clubs are everywhere in the world, basically. There are a lot of competing priorities, right? So I think one of the main things for us is to help our internal stakeholders to understand that there is such a thing as the customer journey, right? There is such a thing because generally, the idea or the desire is to come up with content and just push it out, right? Just push it out, check the boxes. We've done our part, great, but people don't think of the whole cycle and where their customers are, right? So we have competing priorities. For example, if you're talking about what's the purpose overall, right? Is it philanthropy? Is it membership engagement? Is it gaining memberships, retaining memberships? So there are a lot of things in that spectrum. And generally what we try to present to our internal stakeholders to help them visualize the journey is a simple question of where are they? Like what are we trying to achieve overall? And sometimes they don't quite get it. So we try to break it down by saying, what are you trying to achieve? Is it everybody that needs awareness of this situation, or is that everybody? Is it about desire? So if you're asking for, if it's a fundraising campaign, is it about the fact that they are not aware that the campaign exists? Is it the fact that they don't have the desire to donate? Is it they don't know how to do it? They don't know where to go to do the donations, or they don't? Is it a matter of reinforcement? They are just donors that we have, and even from that perspective, if I'm thinking of one portion of what we do, which is the philanthropy side, which is donations, sometimes we have to work with stakeholders to help them understand where their customer is, right? Is it a major donor, somebody who's already been there? Is it a matter of recognizing what they do? So for us, within each segment of our organization, we might have different types of categorization of the content to help them prioritize to the point of how, what means you're going to use, right? How you're going to communicate. Is there going to be a video? Is there going to be an ad in the magazine? So there are a lot of layers there that we try to help in the communications group overall. So that's one very important thing that works very well for us. We work very closely with the whole communications group. So when we're talking about positioning and categorizing content, we're not just talking from the localization perspective. We're just part of this overall strategy for communications and marketing and positioning of that we need to do.
All right. So you have to collaborate, obviously, with other internal stakeholders to figure out these categories that are going to be the ones you're going to go with to make these kinds of decisions, right? You have to talk to your marketing department, the content creation people, of course, and of course always keep in mind what the immediate goals of the organization are as well. So once you've created your categories and you kind of know where everything fits in terms of the customer journey or the stakeholder journey, within each category, like how do you decide what's going to get localized first? I mean, assuming you can't localize everything all at once and that certain things need to be done first before launch, let's say in the case of a new product or service. And then other things can come later, when you have the bandwidth or when there's a demand for it in the new locale that you're targeting. What kinds of factors do you have to think about when you make those decisions about how you prioritize within these categories? Do things like the medium within the medium of the content, and by that I mean whether it's a piece of text, whether it's a video, whether it's maybe a piece of audio content, does that affect where you rank it in order of priority? Because some things are going to require more resources and others less, and so you kind of, does that enter the calculation? And can you give me some examples? Let's start with Carmen.
Turn. So for us, there is a slight, we approach things slightly different. If it's a market we are currently in, how we prioritize content for established markets, or if it's new markets we want to enter, right? So for current markets, as I was saying before, we mainly focus on all the research that has been done based on customer journeys and pain points. We prioritize those areas or those content types that are mitigating the pain points. In other words, the content that customers have said already, hey, we need it, right, in local language. In our industry, we have also a set of requirements there for prioritization that it's not really related to customers, it's related to legal and regulatory requirements. As soon as we get into medical devices or in vitro diagnosis, priorities get a little bit easier because it's actually dictated by the country or regional regulatory bodies, right? And they normally have quite strict rules. For new markets, for us, it's key to do customer research, right? We need to understand the customer before we prioritize. We did in the past to prioritize based on what we thought they wanted, and it was not really a success. So that's a learning I will share. Try to know your customers with facts and data rather than just do what you think it should be done. And to your question on how to deploy content. So Agilent, we are not there yet 100%, but the whole idea of omnichannel, it's actually being able to deploy the content in the different formats based on customer needs. So the whole question around prioritizing the channel, it's somehow gone, because if you really achieve omnichannel, you will be able to deploy in different, in whatever the preferences are from customers. So, yeah.
Yuka, what would you add to that? How, in your experience, what are some good ways to decide what to localize first and what to leave until later?
It was very interesting what Carmen said, because I didn't know that the priority is dictated by the authorization. I mean, you can't really do random thing. You have the order, and you have to present in such a way that it's fit into the market, and it's legal in that region. But what I do is totally different. And this is not what I do at Intento, but one of my acquaintance shared with me when he was talking about his localization experience. He has lots of e-course content, and he wanted to localize it. So he localized it with a localization company and costed $200,000 because he's based in New York. And when he wanted to launch, he suddenly realized that he can't, because he didn't have the back-end system to support this content, meaning there's no support agent. They didn't think about how to support all the people coming in to consume these localized version. So he lost $200,000. I mean, he couldn't launch. So before prioritization, I mean, for the small businesses or those who are going global right now, not talking about corporate like Carmen or Miguel or Patrick, those who are going global right now, first we need to think what is going to be needed before prioritize it. So for that, you need a specialist. Yes, Carmen?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Sorry to add on this, but I relate to that so much.
Yeah.
We had a project here where Agilent, it's like, oh, we go digital, great. Let's do a web chat. We did all the web chat interface, we did everything, we deployed. And then the business sales came and said, who is going to support this? It's like, and my team, we don't own the end-to-end process, right? So someone came to us and say, we need this in 9 languages. Like, okay, let's do it. We did all the testing, all the fun, but no one thought on the end-to-end process and who is going to support that. So that happens more often than we think, which is scary.
Who decided to do localization of this content?
The product owners and the people in digital channel deciding that was a feature they wanted to deploy. Did they talk with the business? Did they build what I see normally where I'm not sure if companies, or at least my company, fails, is to make the strategy operational, right? They think at the strategic level, but no one really thinks on how to implement that. So we see often a gap there, which is very scary, because you do an investment on the strategy, but then it never gets implemented, or it gets poorly implemented.
I have a question. If you were included in this discussion when they're making strategy, you could have said that.
Well, yes, but this is even above me, right? This is to some extent common sense. Like how no one thought about sales support, right, for a web chat.
Yeah, but this is common thread. I mean, my acquaintance didn't think about it. He's a very business-oriented person, and your company is very professional. So this is a common thread that really needs to be there to support all this kind of effort.
Yeah, and end-to-end process. Content doesn't live in a bubble alone, right?
No.
Content, we were discussing the other day, right? Content fits a purpose. What is the purpose, and where does it go? And
that's where the customer journey, that's exactly it, right? You have to always keep it in mind. Even if some things get priority, it doesn't mean that you're not absolutely going to need these other things down the road. And just because they're not prioritized doesn't mean you're not going to need them eventually. So good points. Miguel, what would you add to this conversation about, what needs to be localized first, and on what basis? How do you decide that? At King.
Yeah, in our case, what needs to be localized, we approach it balancing 4 factors. Some of them mentioned, as Carmen was saying earlier. The first one is the English proficiency in the markets we want to penetrate. We all know that some countries feel more comfortable with English, so the approach is going to be different if we want to have something for my Swedish colleagues that they have a super high English level, or here in Spain. So the tolerance of the English, it's an important factor for the content type and the priority. The second variable is the complexity of the market and or the challenges of the technical implementation. For example, I've been involved in some projects that implementing internationalization best practices to include Arabic. It faced different challenges, from font selection to the implementation of the font in the game engines to mirroring the UX layout. So that has impact not only the what needs to be localized, but also when it needs to be localized. The visibility of the content is the third parameter. For example, the tutorial in a game, it has to have big priority when it comes to decide what gets translated. The tutorial needs to be top-notch quality, because otherwise we might fail to build engagement if the players don't understand how to play. So that's super important there. And cost is the other variable and factor we need to balance, because, well, all of us operate infinite budgets, so that's also important. So yes, summarizing, it's a combination of the English proficiency, the complexity of the market / internationalization challenges, visibility of the content, and cost.
Patrick, what would you add to this point about how you decide what to localize first within categories?
Those are very good points. And generally, I think when I'm hearing these situations, I think of a common situation that happens with folks coming up with a solution without identifying what the problem really is, right? So for example, we had a situation that somebody came, a stakeholder said, we have this increase in donations in this part of the world. So now we need to make this platform localized to them. And one might say, well, that's great, right? It makes sense because, you know, we have to tailor to that. But the question really is, what do they really need, right? Are they able to operate in the English platform right now? It looks like they are, because the donations are increasing, right? So that doesn't seem to be the problem. So then we dug deeper in this conversation to say, okay, what do they say? What, again, I think, and Carmen mentioned that, listening to your customer, right? What do they actually need? Is it really because it's a direct correlation of donations are increasing, we need to cater? And then it was interesting because through that exercise, we're able to identify that the best solution, or the prioritization, the type of content that we needed for that segment at that point, was to create content from scratch that was not from English, in their language, recognizing all the good things they were doing and recognizing the donations they were doing, how that was coming back to the community. So actually, with that recognition, donations increased even more. And then, as you mentioned very well, Kathrin, it doesn't mean that we wouldn't do it eventually, but it was not maybe the right time at the right place to do that specific prioritization of that type of content based on a piece of information which was very important, was very relevant, but just about how you put that, how do you place that puzzle or that piece of the puzzle to make everything come together.
Well, let's talk about how these decisions then affect the method of localization that you choose, because, you know, these days, of course, we have all kinds of different options. Some are more automated, some are more manual. How does the customer journey and the purpose of the content you're dealing with affect your choice of the method of localization? And how do new technologies like NMT, for instance, affect your decisions around prioritization in general? Like, are there things that you might not have prioritized, 10 years ago, but now, because it's much more doable because of MT, you can suddenly prioritize these things, which would have been unthinkable, some years ago. Let's start with Yuka.
Okay. Yeah. It's a good question, and it's not just localizing, but we have to think about what Patrick was saying, that the content originated from the local market. I mean, this has a very important way in the content creation world, because we really have to think that localization is used because it's cheaper than creating in the local market. That was the first thought. We can translate the content without creating it local market, which is much more expensive. But depending on the budget and depending on the purpose, we have to mix locally originated content with localized, translated content, I think. And being said that, content creation in English is sometimes a localization, meaning I'm based in Spain, so people who may write in English is not native. So we have to be very careful of what's really source, who is writing. And I jump into the technology right now because we don't have too much time. Not just translation, but creation is going for machine right now. For example, GTP3 is not perfect, not maybe usable, but we are seeing that we can create the content, multilingual content using machine. And actually, in Japan, there's a big, one of the biggest PR companies, media company. I know they're using AI to create the source content in Japanese. And sometimes they can't really, people can't really tell which is machine, AI, which is human. So this is where we are getting to.
Carmen, how at Agilent, how does the customer journey influence how you decide how to localize certain things and how to localize other things, and how has how have new technologies affected that kind of prioritization for you?
So for us, it's I guess mixture. So as we were discussing before, right? It's based on what do we want the content for? What is the goal of the content? Well, I mean, it's not the same. Are we trying to pursue buying, or is it just user-generated content for support, or what is it for, right? So that would be the main piece to it. And then another thing that again it's very unique to my industry, it's the risk that such content expose to Agilent, right? It's IVD is regulated, is what it's going on legally and with that content. So depending on these two things, and also the customer research that I was naming before and the pain points, we tend to prioritize, right? And it's a mixture on what customers want and what Agilent want to push to customers. So it's not only what they want to consume, it's what they want, what we want them to consume. Tricky. So that's how we also prioritize on and how we define what process or workflow we want it to be. It's also important to consider, especially on the where to decide, the cultural differences and who is the author of the content and what is the style. Because then you get to some content types that you might want to go through transcreation or really directly create regionally, and others that localization will suffix, while other ones it's okay to use neural machine translation. Even though for us on the technology side we are somehow limited, Natasha within my team presented today around our MTKs. Any technology we want to use, the regulatory requirements need to be vetted by IT and legal. We were able to use neural machine translation for the community portal, right? And it's a very nice use here, where the priority for it's high. They use it. They want to have that support. There is an right. They want to have it and they want to have it now. They cannot wait for us to localize it traditionally. There is such a volume that we cannot afford to localize it manually, and it's online conversation. It's low risk from a regulatory perspective, right? So it's how all these puzzles come together, and you have what we create is a matrix with all these parameters I described in this example. I hope it
It's
makes
really
sense.
complex. Yeah.
Yeah.
Miguel, I mean, how do you handle these decisions at King around how to localize certain things and how to localize other things and how to leverage new technologies to help you, and how does all that kind of play into your prioritization process?
It's somehow a little bit similar to what Carmen was describing of the matrix and the different pieces on the puzzle, because the way we do it is that basically there are three main localization approaches: professional human translators, machine translation, and machine translation with post-editing. And then we have the different types of content, that the key there is the visibility. So depending on the visibility of the content itself, it goes to one or the other. So being specifically, if we are talking about marketing content, probably what you want there is the best professional you can hire to create creative transcreation. The same it might go when it comes to legal. But probably if you are dealing with tweets and forums in the games, maybe machine translation is a good solution for this, because it's fine at that level of visibility. And if you are into, I don't know, customer support, maybe something in between, like a machine translation with some proof editing and post editing. So it's basically trying to connect the visibility of the content and the complexity, because each type of content merits its own translation approach. So it's just this kind of matrix of visibility and quality of the localization approach and the tolerance to the mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Patrick, how about you? How does the type of content you're dealing with inform your approach to how it's going to get localized, and does technology play a role in prioritizing things or not prioritizing other things?
Yeah, and it's very much the same as described by my fellow panelists. It's about visibility. It's about, how fast you need to go, who's going to see it, what's the impact, what's the purpose of the content, what we're trying to achieve with it. And for us, the most important thing of usage of technology as part of our strategy as global communications is really to leverage on what Yuka was mentioning at the beginning. We have, a priority that we have overall is digital first. And we have been leveraging more and more social media as part of our conversation with the universe, as many of us have been doing for many years. And we shifted that conversation from being, a localization approach to really being that original content creation. So for us, that's when technology is key, is to be able to allocate time and resources to focus on those more meaningful conversations that are really relevant because they're originally created and engage the consumer or the customer or the stakeholder in a much higher level, and of course cope with the high volume, low budget, and the day-to-day operations of the things that still need to happen that we cannot just ignore or push away because they're not going to just disappear because we want them to. So yeah.
Well, I want to ask each one of you, if you're sitting down with someone who just wants to pick your brain about how they can make their content strategy, their localization strategy at their organization better, more efficient, more efficient, and maybe find some efficiencies as well, and more effective, of course. That's ultimately the goal, is to be effective. Content always has a purpose, as we said. What would be your main piece of advice to someone over a cup of coffee about, in your experience, how can you make the localization strategy how can you make your localization strategy more effective, more efficient? And what are some ways that you have personally been able to do that at your organization with maybe an example or two? I'll start with you, Patrick.
Sure. Yeah. So one of the things that have been very important to us is really to, again, not act alone, right? Is bring those allies that you have in your organization. And I mentioned earlier that we take the approach for content through a whole communications group. So we're embedded in the communications group, but the whole communications group really tackles content together. So we're not, and it took us a long time to get there, but we used to be, as many of us are in that process at the end tail of things, right? Your second thought and all that. So now we're in a much better and more strategic position that we are part of something that we formalize and put some structure around, that we actually have a content strategy board that's formed by members of the communications group, and we have a voice at the table, we have a seat. So when stakeholders through the organization are coming to us and throwing that they need a video or they need that, or the conversation really takes those two steps back, and then we have the dialogue. And the idea in doing that, and we use a lot of the appreciative inquiry model of like, what are you trying really to achieve? And so it's also important to have that alliance with others that own content or that are going to help you to shape content through different means, and mainly ask the right questions, right? Because I think that really helps the stakeholders, the other business units, to understand that shared ownership, that the success of the content is not just on me in communications, not just on me as the localization as part of that process, but if we really think together, if we really think about the right questions to ask, we take the customer journey into consideration, we all win, right? Your success is my success. So it takes a while, but I think that's been the most effective way of achieving and putting better strategy behind content and helping folks understand the importance of content, the customer journey, and everything that comes with it.
Yeah. Just realized we're running out of time here, but I do want to get your key takeaways, each one of you. Maybe you can quickly, in a nutshell. Miguel, do you have one key takeaway that you would like to impart about your advice for approaching a localization strategy in a better way?
Patrick already mentioned the content board, and I think that that's something that we need to emphasize a lot, the concept of partnership and together is better. That's something that localization professionals, we hear very often, that we are an afterthought, blah, 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 blah. So then what we need to ensure is that we partner with content creators and marketing teams in the company to have a good understanding of the types of content and marketing plans. And once that partnership is there, then we shape the content localization strategy as we've been discussing today, depending on the visibility, and you do this, you do that, but definitely the partnership, so we are not in a silos, it's super important.
Carmen, would you like to quickly say something?
Well, it's basically adding to what Patrick and Miguel already said. For me, it's even more than partnership. We're all content, right? It's not that we're something aside. It's localization in language content. That's how I call it internally. Actually, it's content, and we're all part of the same thing, right? It's the same processes, same journey, same everything. It's just one of us, one groups take care of the original or headquarters customers, and the rest we take care of regional customers. So
Yuka, do you have a quick final word?
Yeah, I mean, I resonate with all of them, and the approach Patrick has is mine as well. Ask great questions, good questions, and I step back one step more. I question what's global, what's globalization. There I start, so many people don't know that there's no such thing as a global market, the global market. It's a collection of your local market. There's no one fit all global market. This is where I start.
a good way to end the discussion. I don't know if we have time for questions. I think we're almost out, but maybe one or two.
We have 3.5 minutes left, so we can definitely address
Sorry about
some of them.
that.
No problem. I think it was a dynamic discussion. So there were questions, of course. I don't know, Kathrin, do you have access to them? Would you like to
I
see
haven't
them,
had
or
a
would you like
chance
me
to
to go
take a
through them
look
for you?
at them. So if you want to just,
I can kick them off, definitely.
yeah, please go ahead.
We had the original question from Info Translistars. In the awareness stage, Miguel was describing, so it's going back to a while back now, what would be best, investing on localization or creating content for the target markets directly in their language, sort of through a transcreation effort? I know we discussed this throughout, but perhaps you can just touch on that.
To build awareness, taking a transcreation approach is the best approach, because you are going to engage locally with the potential users. It's more expensive, so that's something that it needs to be always balanced in the budget. But if the budget is there, definitely creating content in local language from scratch is the best possible approach.
All right. Second question. What is your opinion on GPT-3's sales marketing product generator? It's an open question. I don't know if anybody wants to jump in.
What did you say? For marketing?
Yeah, so the GPT-3 sales marketing product generator, just opinions with respect to it.
Yeah, I tested a little bit, and it can bring some interesting creation, and definitely, for example, for HR, I think it work like creative posting. It's just general thing, So you can try, and it works for maybe sales as well.
Excellent. And we have a last one, and we're just about at time, so we're going to try and squeeze it in. How do you manage quality of translation at source? Do you have guidelines for authoring source copy? Do you have source QA? How do you actually go about that process?
So I can
And this
contribute to
again
that.
is open, so anyone.
Yeah. So for us, we have a writing style guide for source, right? It's a corporate one actually across the whole company. Most of our content authors are using authoring support like acrolinks, right? It's key to have also, well, we have a corporate terminology terminologist and a terminology board. So these three, for us at least, are the pillars for content authoring, although it's still a little bit decentralized. But yeah, some things to still do there.
Great. We have literally 30 seconds left. Any final words that anybody wants to throw in? No.
I mean, I think any of the panelists would probably be open to fielding some questions later as part of on LinkedIn or
Right.
wherever. So I know I would be. So.
Yeah, we do have questions going on in the community. So definitely check that out, because I know a lot of people are going to be probably asking questions there after the panel. I also wanted to thank everybody that participated today. The discussion, again, and we saw the comments going by, was fantastic. A lot of people were just saying, it's common sense, and yet we're talking about it today because it's not, or not everybody's aware of it. So thank you very much for all the input, all the perspective. It was great. And thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
So.
All right.